require anything, but she would always fill our house with the sound of beautiful melodies. And because my family was a religious family, people of faith, we went to church all the time. In fact, I'm just seeing these books back here. These are actually, let's see if my pointer works. Let's see, I don't want to punch the wrong thing. Let's see here. Oh, there it is. These books right here are actually 9 books that are religious books that I just realized. I have those books even today because when my mom passed, I made sure that I took some things that would really stay with me and that I knew I could appreciate and hold on to. This is one of those photo shoots that we would do from time to time as a family. I had an older sister named Gwen. She was 11 years older than us. And Gwen, we called her Zimmy, was always like an aunt. And she made the absolute best ziti in the world. I mean, when she would come over to the house and we found out that Zimmy was coming, it was almost like Santa Claus was coming to the Anderson home. Because she would come bearing gifts. And Zimmy would come in and she'd usually have gifts for her brothers and sisters, and then she would have this big pan of baked ziti because it would always be what we requested, and it would be oozing with cheese and just bubbling and just doing all kinds of good stuff in anticipation of a great experience. That was the experience I had growing up in a home in public housing with 2 parents who loved us. My dad was a laborer, worked for International Flavors and Fragrances for 34 years. And my dad, when he retired, I think had about 1,000 hours of sick leave because he was never sick. You know, I would watch my dad get up every morning, he would get dressed. And here's a strange thing about it in one sense. My dad worked in a factory, mixing fragrances and all kinds of liquids and things of that nature. But when my dad left the house, you would have thought that he was an executive of a company. My dad would have a hat on, he wore a suit every day, he put a tie on, and my dad never owned an automobile, never in his life owned an automobile, neither did my mother, never in their lives. And so my dad would get up every single morning, walk 2 blocks to the train station, catch the F train up to 42nd Street. At 42nd Street, he would get off the train and go to the Port Authority bus terminal where he would get a bus over into New Jersey, and Teterboro, New Jersey, there's a little airport out there, Teterboro, New Jersey, and my dad would walk from the bus stop to the plant. He did that for 34 years, dressed in a suit. And he would take his suit off when he got to work and put it in the locker room, put on his uniform. And it was funny because when my dad retired and I saw all of his friends and they were having such a great time and they were showing these little photo clips of him in the plant, I said, I've never seen my dad in his work suit, you know, because I'd seen him in his real suit. And so I said it was interesting because my dad had a work ethic second to none. And yet my dad would work hard all day long and he'd come home and have time for his family. My mom cleaned houses for people. If you know anything about New York City, there's an area of New York called Forest Hills, Kew Gardens, areas in that places around New York City, Flushing Meadows, where they actually played the U.S. Open tennis games, and a lot of wealthy people lived in that area back in the day. I think it's changed a lot, but my mom would clean houses in that area. And yet my mom would be home every day after school, and she would have food on the table for us and time to spend with her children. The point I'm making is this, that as a family of 5 and 6, 5 plus 1, Gwen was living outside the house at this time, we never disparaged living in public housing. It's one of those funny things about being from public housing. You don't sit around talking about, oh my gosh, I'm living in public housing. You know, it's just something that happens. But yet we form opinions and ideas about people who come from public housing experiences and environments. And we do that fairly sometimes and unfairly at other times. And the reality is this, that we were an intact family, and I had mom and dad who loved each other for 34 years until the day my dad had a massive heart attack and died. There was never any separation. There was always nothing but love. And I tell people that, you know, we didn't have a Beverly Hills experience, but boy, did we have a lot of love in that home. That was the anchor. That was the rock. That was the foundation. That was the value system that my parents shared with me as we were growing up. One of the most fascinating and amazing things about growing up in New York City is the variety of food that you can be exposed to. And from a purely cultural and ethnic perspective, there's nothing that is off limits. You can find anything you want. And it's funny because sometimes you go to restaurants, and I'll just give it as a small example. I know more and more restaurants have vegetarian and vegan options. And more cities have maybe a vegan restaurant or two, or maybe three, depends. But New York, it's like there's one in every corner. You know, so it's not like you're searching and looking for stuff. It's there. If you want it, it's there. If you want a certain cuisine, it's there. If you want a certain style of that cuisine, it's there. You can find whatever you want. And so I grew up in a community that was about 2 blocks away from the FDR Drive. It's below Delancey Street, which is a pretty famous street in New York, in Manhattan. And there were delicatessens everywhere, Jewish delicatessens. And one of my favorite things was to walk into that Jewish delicatessen and order food or bring some stuff home. I remember growing up and my parents began trusting us to be able to go to the store and they would give us a little money and say, go buy this and go buy that. One of the most favorite things that I used to get a chance to go and buy were these things, potato knishes. And if you want to make Kenny Anderson happy, put a potato knish in front of him. It would make me smile, it'll make my stomach turn somersaults. I mean, it'll make me a very happy person. There's a company called Gabilla's Knishes. And from time to time, I'll treat myself. You know, now that I'm older and have little money, I can order Gabilla Knishes through the internet, and they'll package them, come to the house, and I'll have about 25 of them packed in there, and I'll put them in the freezer and just pull one out every now and then. And the way you eat a knish is very simple. You just pop that thing in that oven. It's got all that potato packed in there. It's really good. You pop that thing in the oven, let the edges, not the whole thing, let the edges get brown, and then throw a little mustard on the top of it. Boy, what a meal. What a meal. One of the most wonderful things that can happen to you as a consequence. You've never had the potato knish experience. You need to have it. It's a wonderful thing. And this kind of experience was just one of the many different kinds of food and ethnic experiences that we have. You know, it's a funny thing about food. Food is a uniter. You know, I think I've rarely seen people fight outside of, I mean, there may be, you know,
fight for the food.
Maybe fight for the food, but not fight about the food. I mean, most people are happy to get an invitation. Most people, they break out to a smile and is food being served? They'll ask that question even. You invite them somewhere, food being served? You know, it just does something to us as a consequence of that exposure to that thing. And I want to tell you something about pizza. I want to be perfectly honest for just a moment. If Domino's happens to be your favorite pizza, I don't want to insult you. That's a disclaimer right now. I don't want to insult you. Now, if you get excited about Domino's Pizza, more power to you. I'm going to put this down because I'm going to get really excited in a moment. And I don't mean to offend you. I'm just going to tell you the truth about it. There are only three pizzas to talk about in this world. We're going to not count Italy pizza, like real Italian pizza from Italy. I'm just going to put them to the side because nothing tops that anyway. But there happen to be people who live in both New York and Chicago who have the recipe. So because I'm from New York, I'm always debating with people who live in my second favorite city, which is Chicago, about pizza. You've not had pizza until you've had New York pizza. And I'm going to tell you how to do it because there's a strategy to it. So you're down on 42nd Street, which looks like Disneyland now. It didn't look like that back in the day. It looks like Disneyland, family friendly and everything, but it was horrible back in the day. I mean, it's just Google 70s New York, 42nd Street. You don't want to be there, seriously. But now it's Disneyland. You know, you go down there at 12 o'clock at night, and it's like 5 million people walking around. It's like, where are all these people going at night? And they're there, and lights and every beautiful thing. But here's what you do during the day. Maybe sometime about 2:30, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, you walk up from 42nd Street all the way down to 47th Street. And maybe 7th Avenue, 8th Avenue, or 9th Avenue. Don't go to the east. That's the side of, that's the real progressive type of town in terms of socioeconomic status, et cetera, et cetera. So really, really nice places, expensive places. You want to go to the west side. And west side below 59th Street, because if you go up beyond 59th Street, then you get into all of the wealth one more time. You get into some really fancy places over that way. And so you go up to, I'd say, about 47th Street, about 2:30, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and you start walking down the block, and because all of the buildings are tall, everything's always a shadow. Doesn't matter how much sun is shining. And you look down the block, and you look for the pizza sign, and you look for the pizza sign, not the one that's intact that says P-I-Z-Z-A. You look for the one that says P, no light, Z-Z-A. The light has to be missing in order to know that this is going to be an extraordinary pizza experience. And as you get closer to the door, you start sensing that aroma. And I mean, oh man, you start smelling the oregano in it. I mean, this is going to be an experience. And then you look inside. This is the test, folks. I'm serious about this. You see how serious I am? I'm serious about this. And you look inside the window, and it has to be a little cloudy. You can't just have a clear glass window. It has to be one of those windows that you have to say, do I need to really go in there? It has to be one of those experiences. And it's a little cloudy. Maybe the cloudy is here, and you got to look up there. Maybe the cloudy's up here. You got to do like this. You know, it's a total body experience. And then you look inside, and you look for the biggest stainless steel ovens, but they cannot be shiny. They have to have rust on them, which means that they've been used over and over again, and that the people that are using them are masters. And they pop that pizza. You don't order pizza by the pie. You don't do the pie. You get a pizza slice. They say, give me one slice with extra cheese. They slap that wax paper on there. They put it in there. That cheese starts running off the side of it. And when you pick up that wax paper after they take it out the oven, you bite that first bite. It's like the best thing that ever happened. But here's what's going to happen next. The cheese and the olive oil is going to start dripping down your arm. And you're going to start doing like this. Because it's so good. And you will not believe that you had such a good tasting slice of pizza. It's an extraordinary experience. I had that experience many, many times growing up in New York. And again, the appreciation for different kinds of food opened up opportunities for me to appreciate other cultures. That's the point I'm making in there. I'm going somewhere with this, by the way. So, this is just an introduction. I know we got a little time, but I'm going to get it all in this next hour and 45 minutes. So here, anybody recognize this? Yes, that's when the World Trade Center was being erected. Now, I didn't take that picture, but I found that picture because I actually watched the World Trade Center being built in New York City. And I remember when they finished the World Trade Center, it was that incredible marvel that my friends and I might have been about 15 or 16 at the time when they finished it, maybe even a little younger than that. But we would just go down. I mean, we didn't have any business down there. We didn't have any reason to be there except that there were elevators that went all the way up to the 110th floor. And we were going to try that thing out. And I mean, if the elevator went to the 16th floor in our building, we only marveled at what would happen in the building where it went up at jet speed to 110 stories. We were just absolutely blown away by that experience. So you can only imagine. And I know how traumatic the experience was. I know we just celebrated at least acknowledged the 21st anniversary of that tragedy of 9/11 just last Sunday. But you can remember how personal, or take into account how personal that experience was for me, watching those towers come down after I had seen those towers actually being erected, and then having spent many days in those towers. This was one of my favorite places growing up. That's Yankee Stadium. That's the original Yankee Stadium that was built in 1923. And that's the Yankee Stadium that my dad would bring me to see games. My dad was a huge baseball fan. You want to make Kenny Anderson happy? Let's talk baseball. And you want to make him even happier? Let's go to a Yankees game. I don't care what a Yankees game is. Whenever they go play the Atlanta Braves, I go down to Atlanta to check out the Yankees play. You with me?
I'm with you.
All right. Amen for over here. That's good. I am the biggest Yankee fan. Let me tell you how big of a Yankee fan I am. So they tore down the original stadium from 23. I have a seat back from the original Yankee Stadium that was built in 1923. They rebuilt the stadium in 1977 and opened it up again, and they tore that one down in 1990, so maybe 2001 or something like that. And now we've got this thing called the internet, and I ordered a seat from the renovated Yankee Stadium. So I have the full seat, number 25, sitting in my study, and every now and then when I'm watching a Yankees game, guess where I get to sit? In seat number 25 from the renovated Yankee Stadium. That's a true story. Baseball is my sport. I love baseball. I remember sacrifices my dad made. Bleacher seats were only $1 at that time. This was a long time ago. They were only $1. My dad would take me out to games, and it was just one of the most wonderful things. I thought my dad was the best person in the world when he would take me to these Yankee games and give me that appreciation for that kind of experience. It was a beautiful thing. And I still, let me tell you one more quick thing. So this is the third version of Yankee Stadium now. And in 2019, I'm always trying to be creative on my birthdays because I'm getting older now. You know I have fewer birthdays in front of me than I have behind me. I'm okay with that. Don't look grim and sad. I'm okay. I'm okay. It's true. It's true for all of us, but everybody hasn't negotiated like I have. It's okay. I know. So in 2019, just before the pandemic hit, it was September. I was in the middle of something that I do every year in Huntsville called Jazz in the Park. It's a huge music festival, and my birthday falls on September 19th every year, because that's when I was born, which means my birthday is Monday.
Happy birthday.
Thank you. And I celebrate all month. So when I post on Facebook, I say I'm taking the last week of August and the first week of October too. And I'm celebrating all September. I do. I mean, listen, if you don't celebrate yourself, you got to invest in you. And so in 2019, I know I got to get back by Sunday. And so I looked at the calendar. Yankees were in town on Thursday night. I said, yes. So I caught a plane Thursday morning. I caught the Yankees game that night. I came back to Huntsville on Friday, and I said, yes, now this is really living the life. And I was just in that experience, channeling my dad and thinking about how wonderful it would have been to have had him there, to be able to give him that experience as he had given me that experience so often. So I'm a huge baseball fan. I'm also a huge fan of these places. This is the American Museum of Natural History that sits on the west side of New York, up in that area I was telling you about, once you get into the more prosperous part of this particular city. In fact, just a little bit to the west of here would be the building where John Lennon was shot. It's about 2 blocks away from right here. And Central Park, if you could see the whole picture over here, Central Park, which is a 50-block park, is right on this side over here. Beautiful park, by the way. Seen Central Park, been there and never been there. Beautiful park. One of the things that I was appreciative of as a child, because we didn't have a lot of money to travel, was the fact that my parents would take us to museums. And this was my favorite museum. And the American Museum of Natural History is a big museum. It's a big museum that you don't go through in one day. It's like a multi-day, maybe multi-trip kind of experience because it's so big. You know, if you spend time in the dinosaur exhibit, and then you spend time in the Native American exhibit, and you spend time in the reptiles and amphibians exhibit, I mean, it just, and I'm one of those, I read everything. You know, look, if you don't like museums, you don't need to go with me. I stop at everything. Why am I there if I'm not going to read, right? And reading is fundamental, and so I'm reading, and, you know, and I'm kind of channeling all of those joys of being a child when we didn't have a lot of money to go places, but I could travel places because of where we were able to go. I had that same experience by going to libraries, and there was never any border or boundary in my life because I was a big reader. And in between my house and the school was a library. And I can remember the pride and joy I had of going and stopping by that library every day and coming home with a stack of books. I was that kid, and I never thought of myself as a nerd, but if this was nerdy, then it was nerdy. And Christmas time, I would ask for a World Book of Facts. The World Almanac and Book of Facts. That's what I want. You don't want a toy. No, I want a World Book. I take that World Book with all those beautiful pictures and colors in there. And I remember as a child, this is another thing, my parents used to always get World Book encyclopedias because people will come by your house and sell you encyclopedias. And knock on your door and oh, Mom and Dad, encyclopedia person's here. You know? And so my parents would do, and here's an interesting thing again. You know, my parents didn't have a lot of money, but they knew the value of knowledge and literacy. They understood that fundamentally. My dad only went to 8th grade, my mom only went to 12th grade, but they knew the fundamental value of education, and they wanted to make sure that their children were lined up for that experience. And so I think they've done a remake on it now, but there was a game show when I was a kid called Concentration. Mm-hmm. And I think they have a new rebooted version right now. But they used to always have Children's Week on Concentration. And so I wrote and said, I want to be a part of Children's Week on Concentration. And I was accepted. And so I got on the concentration game show with the original host, and I played the game. I actually got to play the game on TV, and I will tell you what the puzzle was. The puzzle was saving for a rainy day. I lost. I didn't solve the puzzle, but I remember what it was. The consolation prize was a World Book encyclopedia set that I still have today, sitting in my library, and a concentration home game. I was the happiest. I was sad, but I was the happiest person in the world. You did not offend me because that was my prize. I don't remember what the grand prize was even, but I was happy because I had that. And I kept that for years and years and years. In fact, when I came all the way 1,000 miles from New York to go to school in Huntsville, I told my parents I wanted to take my World Book encyclopedia set with me. They said, sure, take it. Sure, take it. I was 16 when I was on that show. So museums have always meant a lot to me. You might also, if you really kind of looked at that picture, it may look like something that you've seen before, because a lot of people have seen the preparation area for the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade. This is the strip where that happens, all along here around the 70s and 80s. And they get the parade prepped in this area. So by the time you get down to 34th Street, which is the big Macy's, the block-long building, a multiple block-long building, that's where they have the TV cameras and the hosts from NBC and all that stuff out there. So really what would happen was my parents would take us to the parade. We would catch the parade up there in the 70s. And by the time the parade got down to the 30s, the 34th Street, we'd be home and we could check out what we saw again. It was a really cool experience, and it's always funny and kind of surreal how those kinds of experiences overlap, but going to the parade was amazing. And I love rechanneling things of my youth. When my family was still alive, I remember one time going home to visit. They had moved to New Jersey because my dad had retired, and I told them, I said, I was home for Thanksgiving. I said, you know what, I'd love to go to the parade. And you know, when you go to the parade now, you got to get up real early to get you a good spot. Those people that have spots got up real early. But my parents, even as an adult, my parents made that sacrifice to participate in that experience with me of my childhood. This was my high school. This was Seward Park High School. You can see how tall those buildings are. There are actually 3 of these, 1, 2, 3. This school has closed and has now been repurposed, and it was an absolutely amazing experience. I actually went to the school from 10th grade to 12th grade. This is a very famous high school, by the way. And that doesn't say a whole lot about New York, because there are a lot of famous high schools in New York because of all the people who live in New York who become famous in New York, including Kenny Anderson. Among those, some people might recognize this guy, Walter McDowell. We were not in school together. He was before me. McDowell came before me. But he attended and graduated from Seward Park High School. This is Tony Soprano's sister, and I'm mind blocked.
Aida.
Yes! That was her. Yes, Turturro. She's John Turturro's cousin. And a lot of people know John Turturro from a lot of movies as well. She went there after I did and graduated from Seward Park High School. And then this guy went to Seward Park High School. Not this guy, Keenan Ivory Waynes. Keenan and I were classmates from 10th grade to 12th. When Keenan hit, and this is what he wrote to me, whatever that is that he says, it's been fun knowing you, and I wish the best for you, or whatever. And what was really crazy about that experience was that when I saw Keenan on TV for the first time, it just blew my mind. Because I was like, quiet Keenan? You know, he was so laid back. I was even more laid back than he was. But I said, wow, this is amazing, you know. When he was on a show on NBC many years ago for the first time, it just kind of blew my mind when I saw him. And then when he did I'm Gonna Get You Sucked and all these other things, and all the other Wayans kids started coming out, who I did not know, by the way, because people say, well, did you know Marlon? Did you know? No, they were younger, so I didn't know them. I only knew Keenan and his sister Deidre. And so we had many classes together, many conversations together. I have not seen him since we graduated. We've not spoken since he's graduated. But what was really crazy about it, for those that know a little bit about Keenan left New York to go to Tuskegee, and I left New York to go to Huntsville. We never discussed that, but we ended up in the same place for at least a period of time. He was at Tuskegee for a short period of time before he ended up in Hollywood, and then, you know, for him, the rest was history. But it was a lot of fun going to that school. Another person you know that went to that school, might know that went to that school, was Tony Curtis, who was a very famous actor, and whose wife was Janet Leigh, who was in Psycho, and you know, just a lot of famous people have gone. There is a famous designer also, shoe designer, who's currently makes shoes that are known all over the world, and I also went to, and I'll get his name in just a moment. Little Italy was not far from my school, so I, as I said, walked through that community many times. A lot of people will associate, and rightly so, but it's not the whole story. A lot of people will associate Little Italy with underworld and mafia connections. There were those social clubs. You would see them. You would see people sitting out in front of them. That was always something I really didn't know or understand, but I had a fascination with the mafia growing up, which was very interesting because there were always things happening in the community around that. You know, you just kind of knew the presence, but you didn't always understand the backstory behind that. Also, Chinatown was a big deal. My high school was not far from there. My graduating class of 1,200 students was about a third Asian. So I had friends when I was in high school from many different racial groups, many different ethnic groups, and it was just a very, very positive and wonderful experience. I'm a big movie buff, and it's not hard to come across movie sets and TV sets when you're in New York City. I mean, you literally come off of a subway train, which is underground, you step up, and you look around, and somebody's shooting a movie. You know, I would walk down the street, go to the grocery store, and they're shooting a movie right around the corner over there. One day I'm walking home from school, and I come across this street that looks like it's converted to 1930, 1940. I had no idea what was going on. I started asking questions. They said they're shooting The Godfather 2. And this is a shot from The Godfather 2. This is Francis Ford Coppola, the director. That's Robert De Niro, who was starring in the movie at that time, and it was absolutely fantastic. I did not take that picture, but I did see several images and several scenes that were being shot that I see the film and remember seeing. Two in particular, and I remember seeing being filmed when I was there. I also saw Robert De Niro when he was filming Taxi Driver on 58th Street and 7th Avenue. Didn't know who Robert De Niro was then. Nobody really knew who he was before Taxi Driver, and he won the Oscar. And so it was always amazing. I was so blown away by this, though, because you literally walk down the street, it's 1970-something, and you walk to the next block, and it's 1930, 40-something. And so I run home and tell my sister Jackie they're filming a movie, and we probably hung out there for the next 3 or 4 days just watching them film. It was just so fascinating with all of that energy and activity. You know, you see a movie, it doesn't look anything like what's being filmed, and after all the editing and stuff, it's just fascinating to be in that kind of experience. But this was extremely common. My very first job in New York was as a messenger, a foot messenger, so I would deliver packages to people's houses. And the very first day I went to work for Service Messenger, my boss, Bill Goodman, gave me a package just before he was going to let me go for the day. He said, I want you to take this to Debbie Reynolds. You do know who Debbie Reynolds is, right? She's the actress.
Yes.
I said, yes, I do. And so I went to Debbie Reynolds' house, knocked on the door, Debbie Reynolds answers the door. And so it was that kind of experience. Tony Perkins from Psycho, who was a star in Psycho, I get an opportunity to take a package to him one day. He literally opened the door. And I'm like, wow, this is amazing. You know, I didn't ask for autographs, I didn't do anything. I was just doing my job, I was focused. But just to have that experience over and over and over again was just a wonderful and amazing experience. I'm going to tell you my Bill Cosby story real quick, and I know people have different thoughts and ideas about Bill. But I'm walking down 59th Street and 5th Avenue one day, and right where Central Park begins. I looked across the street over this way, and I see a guy walking down with a tennis racket, shorts, and a cigar. And I immediately said, that's Bill Cosby. And so I said, oh, I'm going to get this autograph. And so I stalked him. Well, I mean, I didn't stalk him. I wasn't creepy. I'm going to watch where he goes. And there's a big hotel sitting on the corner, and I forget the name of that very famous hotel. But he's just about as he's going in, I don't want to invade that. I don't want to go through that, even though it's a public lobby. I said, excuse me, Mr. Cosby, can I have your autograph? And so here's the thing, because you don't walk around the city waiting for autographs, you don't have something to write on. They used to make, if you've ever had one of those ice creams where they got the little plastic top in it, you kind of pop it off or rip it off. I found one of those on the ground. I kind of wiped it off. And I gave it to him to sign, and I still have that autograph today. I mean, it's pretty amazing. I got a ton of autographs from people, Leonard Nimoy and just a bunch of people that, again, I just saw on movie sets and stuff. It was a fascinating experience being in New York. Some of the more historic things that happened while I was living in New York, the assassination of El Haj Malik El Shabazz, formerly known as Malcolm X, took place when I was about 9 years old in the Audubon Ballroom in Harlem. My parents actually used to live in Harlem before they moved down to the Lower East Side of Manhattan, but the Muslims were very, very prominent at that time. You would see them all over the city and all over the community. The rhetoric that was being spoken by the nation was something that was very prominently being portrayed in the news. The magazine that they sold, The Final Call, selling of bean pies, and all of that culture was something that I was exposed to at that time. So it was pretty shocking when El Haj Malik El Shabazz was assassinated. I was 11 years old the night that Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated. And I really remember sitting at my table at home. We were eating dinner. It was about 6-something in the evening, and a flash came over the radio saying that Dr. King had been assassinated. I remember thinking at that moment, 2 times in my life when I felt like, not so much it was the end of the world, but that something really significant had happened. And that was when President Kennedy was assassinated. I was 6 years old at that time, and the teacher came in the room and told us that, I have very sad news, President of the United States has been assassinated. We all need to stand up and say pledge allegiance to the flag. We did that, and they dismissed us for the day. That's what I remember about that. And then when and I was like, boy, something serious has happened. Although I was 6, I felt that. And then Dr. King, I was at 11, because of the civil rights movement at that time, the momentum that they were gaining in that struggle, I just felt like something significant had happened. And then just 2 months later, when Robert Kennedy was assassinated, I couldn't believe it. It was almost like, this is the end of the world. Because it's almost like an assassination of hope and optimism for the future. Whatever, and that's not even a political comment. That's just in terms of where we were at that time. And historians and researchers have studied that time and tried to lend some understanding as to how where we are today based on what was happening then and what could have happened differently. Because when you juxtapose that with things that were happening at the time, including the Vietnam War, and so much more that was going on, the civil rights movement had not been reconciled. We look at the issues of poverty and affordable housing today. They were being negotiated at that time because of the Poor People's Campaign. And the issues of pay and pay equity were being challenged in Memphis, which is why Dr. King was there. And so there are all of these ways that you can look at how what was going on 50 years ago and the impact that it has on our society even today. The Black Panther movement was huge at that time, and I remember so much about that. The women's liberation movement, which found its place all over this nation, but it had a very prominent voice in New York City as we started hearing about all of these things related to women's rights, women's equality, abortion rights. And here we go again, something that happened so long ago that we're revisiting now and actually having to process in some kind of way even now. And then, of course, the gay rights movement, the LGBTQ movement that began at Stonewall, which was a bar in Greenwich Village, which was not far from my house, that was being harassed by police officers. If you ever really get serious about DEI, and you really want to understand the fact that DEI is all about people from other cultures, experiences, identities, etc., and you really say, look, I may not be a member of the LGBTQ group, but I want to understand what those individuals who identify as part of that group have had to deal with. The same thing is saying to me, as an African American. I want to understand what your journey has been. As a person who comes from, a person who perhaps comes from the experience of the Holocaust in World War II. Me saying, I want to read, I want to understand, I want to hear from you, I want to understand what your experience was like, is really what this process is all about. And for me, in terms of DEI work, it's all about understanding different people, where they come from, where they are, and why certain things are the way they are. And then finally, the hip-hop movement began in New York City in 1978-79. I remember going around the city, and I was actually working that summer as a bookmobile person. I don't know what it's called, but there was a bookmobile that I was assigned to, and it would go all over the city, and it had books and games on it. We'd bring it to communities with children and stuff like that. And I remember seeing kids on street corners with turntables and rapping and doing this thing with language that was just different and new to people that people didn't necessarily understand and relate to. And I promise you, there's not one element of society today that has not been influenced by the hip-hop culture. A lot of people isolate the music of hip-hop and don't understand that everything about our society has been influenced by hip-hop. The fashion industry has been influenced by hip-hop. The automobile industry has been influenced by hip-hop. Everything is just watch commercials on TV and listen to the music that's played behind the commercial. Watch the styles that people wear. All of that comes from the hip-hop influence. And so even if you say, I don't like Snoop Dogg, you're personalizing something that has a pervasive impact on society. In fact, when hip-hop superseded country music as the most commonly sold music in the world today, people are like, wait a minute, are you kidding me? In fact, a lot of people, because of their limited experience, would say, well, my favorite music is pop. Or my favorite music is rock. So that's the most sold music. No, the most sold music before hip-hop was country. And now it's hip-hop, rap. And so if we isolate ourselves from these things, and we disconnect ourselves from these things, I'm not saying you got to listen to it. I'm not saying it's got to be your favorite style of music, but you should understand it because it has an impact on our society. It has an impact on our culture. What have I said in saying all of that? This is not, this is not a bio of Kenny Anderson. This is just me saying the intersections of my life have been enriched because of the many different kinds of experiences that I've had over life. The things that I have embraced, the things that I have learned to appreciate, the things that I've learned to value have made me a better person. And when you look at this image here, you see all of the many faces. And we understand that there are many billions of people who live in our world today. And if we don't understand anything else, we need to understand that we live in a world today without boundaries. And that at any given time, you may encounter someone who is different from you. And I'll expound on that in just a moment, but it's more than just race and ethnicity when I talk about difference. And that's one of the main things that we need to understand about DEI. So for me, DEI, and specifically diversity, is all about an opportunity. It's all about stretching myself and moving outside of my comfort zone. It's about moving outside of my experience. And it's about understanding that I don't know what I don't know. The things that I know are things that I own. The things that I know are things that I might even use as the prism of my life to view the world. But the reality is that there's so much more beyond what I know. You know, it's kind of like, well, who made you the end all of information and knowledge? You know, and each of us should ask ourselves that. When we get to the point where we're like, no, I know. I'm like challenging you, and I may not do it out loud, but I'll say, no, you don't necessarily know. You know what you know, but you don't know what you don't know. And I can prove that very easily because every one of us have had experiences where we talked to people and found out things about their lives and experiences that reflected commonalities and also represented differences. And consequently, we all have that shared opportunity when we're dealing with people in life. That, for me, is what diversity is all about. And what's so amazing about that is that I literally surprise myself all the time with learning stuff that I did not know. And so for me, diversity breaks down into three things in terms of its value. Number one, it promotes my self-awareness. It helps me know more about who I am as a person. And one of the most important things that I learned as a psychology major in school, because that's what my degrees were in. One of the most important things I learned was that while I'm learning from a theoretical perspective and an ideological perspective about human behavior, I'm also learning about me. And that was one of the most fulfilling things about psychology for me. I mean, I was learning so much about me while I'm getting ready to get in that office and help people and fix the world. And even, you know, all of us social work people and psychology people, we want to save the world. You know, that's noble, that's admirable, sure. But it's not possible, but we can save who we can save. No, not the world. See, we can have a bigger vision to say that we want to help who we can help, but it's not our job to save the world. It's our job to help who we can help. And that's important. If your investment is there, you'll get a whole lot out of life. And you don't just have to be a therapist to help somebody. That's the other piece of that as well. Isn't that right? Isn't that right?
Yes, that's right.
It enriches our perspectives. And I'm going to talk more about why perspective matters in just a few moments, because that's extremely important in these conversations. And then for me, this deeper understanding and collaboration speaks to what happens in work spaces, what happens in faith communities, what happens in community-based organizations. If I can come into an environment knowing that every single person in that room is different, then my belief is that I can be strengthened from that knowledge because I don't have to know everything. But I can be in a room where a lot of people know some things. And I can be inspired to know we can get some things accomplished. We can get some things done. And so when my self-awareness allows me to be humble enough to say, I don't know everything, and it's okay. And when my self-awareness says there's smarter people in the room than me, and that's okay. You know, a lot of people get real sensitive about that. You know, but I always say, if you think you're the smartest person in the room, you need to find another room, because you're definitely in the wrong room. You know. it's important to acknowledge the fact that everybody comes in with the potential to provide, to enrich, to strengthen, and to collaborate. So once I understand that, I get excited about people who are different. So we can work together as a team. We can build something. We can leave something. We can establish something, because I don't have to do it all by myself. I can work together with you, and I can acknowledge your differences. As I said earlier, diversity has many faces. Unfortunately, we narrow our conversation to just race and ethnicity, and we have to do better than that. This is a polarizing aspect of diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's important. It has tremendous value. It's probably one of the areas that has the greatest value in terms of perhaps where we are in many places in our society today. So I don't diminish it in any way, but we stay there too much. And not only do we stay there too much, we do something else with that. We stay within black and white. Not good. Because if we just looked around, we understand that our nation and our society is emerging as a nation of many people from many places. When I say emerging, I'm not saying it hadn't happened before. That's how we were founded. But more and more people from other identities, cultures, and experiences are coming here, and they're coming to your community. Huntsville, in the 2010 census, had about 10,000 Hispanics living there, according to the census record. We now have 16,000 in 10 years. That's over a 50% increase in just 10 years. Now, I'm the director of the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. Imagine my work if it was only focused on blacks and whites. Or the things that I really got excited or interested in or invested in was about blacks and whites. Look at such a large, prominent part of the population that I'm ignoring as a consequence of that. It's not right, it's not balanced, it's not fair. And so I always tell people, look around the room when you're talking about committees and boards and other kinds of experiences, leadership roles. Look around the room and who's represented. And think about who you are serving, who are your constituents, so that who's in the room reflects who should be in the room. For many, many years now, I've had the opportunity to work on these youth groups. You know, some of us have probably worked with them as well. We're going to come together because our youth are in crisis. You know, youth are in crisis all my life. You know, every generation has had youth in crisis, and they're still in crisis today. So I've had all these different invitations to participate in youth committees. And one of the first things I say today, because I learned this a long time ago, if you don't have youth represented, I don't want to be a part of it. Why are we going to sit around talking about the youth if they don't have their voice represented in the group? So we're out there promoting programs, or wondering why is a certain demographic not involved with what I'm doing. Look around your table. Who's there to speak for those individuals? Who's there to represent those people? Who's there to be able to provide the opportunity to bring them into the conversation? That's why this work is done with intention. You don't roll the dice and hope it lands on whatever number you need. You have to look around the room strategically and say, okay, let's see. This is a group that's talking, and oh, let me say this. If you have please understand what I'm saying. And I'm going to prove it in just a moment. If you have, depending on what the topic is or the focus is, if you have a group focusing on women's issues, don't automatically exclude men. If you're talking about pay equity, for example, and the majority of people, which I think is a crazy debate in 2022, why are we still arguing about pay people what they're worth, promote them based on their value. I mean, we're still arguing about that, though. I don't get it. If those people making those decisions don't look like you need them in the room. Otherwise, you're not going to get very far. You'll make progress, but you're not going to get as far as you need. So what you need is what I'm advocating for. You need allies. You need allies. You need people who speak your language who don't look like you. That's across the demographics. They speak your language, but they don't look like you. You need that. As an African American, if I'm talking about African American issues, I don't just need a bunch of African Americans at the table. If the issue I'm talking about, let's give you a good example. If I'm talking about the stress and the tension between law enforcement and the black community, I don't just need to have black people talking about it. I need to have law enforcement people, and I need to have law enforcement people from other communities at that table. That's one of the first fixes. That's an easy fix. When I say easy, I'm not saying you just quickly go out and grab somebody. But from a strategic intention point, you need to say, okay, let's take stock of what's here. Who's here? What resources are here? And then ask yourself, what's missing? What do we need to add in this process? And I think that's a great strategy to approach. So we're still talking about race. We're still talking about gender. And this is about diversity again. So not just race, but gender. We're talking about religion. And religion gets real crazy sometimes because in the United States, of course, we tend to focus mainly on Christianity as it relates to religion. But there's so many different kinds of religious identities and experiences. I'll give you an example of Huntsville, Madison County, place where I live. So early in the tenure that I have right now, which is almost 10 years with the city, I had a guy come in and ask me about the public prayers taking place at city council meetings. Cliff Notes version of this story. And he was very well researched. And he pulled out this PowerPoint presentation on my desk. He starts going through this information with me. He said, no, by the way, I'm atheist. Now, most people would say that as an atheist, he was arguing against prayer. Most people would say that because most people don't understand atheism. They know what they know about atheism, but they don't understand atheism. There's a difference. And so, I didn't react. I just simply said, so what are you saying? He said, I'm not arguing against praying. I'm arguing for representation. Now, let me show you why. He said, your largest religious group in town are evangelicals. What's the second largest group? N-O-N-E-S. Nuns. People with no religious affiliation, either because they walked away from it, or either they never connected or associated with it. So that was a very interesting point for me because I'm like, wow, we now live in the largest city in the state of Alabama. U.S. News and World Report called us the best city to live in earlier this year. We celebrated that 2 weeks ago in Huntsville, and we're real excited about it. And of course, that was a celebratory moment for a lot of people, but as a DEI guy, I'm always asking, so what does that mean? Does that mean people being represented? I'm not talking about that we got more businesses. We were large and Meta's building 7 call centers, and we've got Monster Toyota bringing in 5,000 jobs, and the FBI that's moving 5,000 jobs here. I went to Arsenal a couple weeks ago, so they're beautiful new facility. They're building 3 buildings out there. That's beautiful building. Is that what we're talking about? Being the best? Are we the best because we're representative and we're hearing people's voices and we're allowing people to be involved in the process of living here in Huntsville? There's a difference in those two things. And so on the point of religion, it's important for us to affirm that there are people who don't necessarily have our religious identity. So we have to ask the question, what does that mean? Now, my solution to the problem or the challenge would be no prayer in a public meeting. Because you have the potential to have, even though the representative groups will not be in a city council meeting, it's being beamed out on the internet, it's being posted online, and it's available to the whole world, not just to the 200,000 plus residents in Huntsville. So again, what is the message that you're promoting in that? And I happen to be a person of faith. I'm a Christian. But I'm saying, listen, if I'm going to be conscientious about people who are different, I don't have a need to impose my faith on someone else. And so you're going to have to absolutely pray to God if you're in my meeting. That's not how I feel. Because I believe God is bigger than that. That's my personal relationship with God. Anybody can have their relationship with God or not have their relationship. I know what I do. So I don't come in, I don't have the WWJD on my shirt. I don't because he's not in my heart. It doesn't matter. If he's not in here, it doesn't matter. I can show you this all day long, but be harboring all kinds of thoughts and ideas in my head. It doesn't matter. And the crazy thing about it is you might not know, but he knows. Anyway, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. That's what religion does. It just kind of gets you there. You're in that well. When you get in that well, it just takes you all the way back to your roots. And, age, diversity issue. Sexual identity and orientation. What is the most prominent conversation in our nation today about sexual identity and sexual orientation?
What are your pronouns?
What is what?
Your pronouns.
What are your pronouns? That's a big one, but that's not the most prominent one. Transgenderism. That's the biggest one. State of Florida now has a don't say gay law.
Not DEI.
Not at all. Not at all. And it's kind of creepy. I went to Florida a couple of weeks ago to see the launch. That didn't happen. But all over Florida, they got these big flyers and posters up and stuff, billboards. I was like, this is amazing. It was like new territory. I was like, wow, folk are taking some of these things seriously. This is a kind of a scary place to live to me. That's what I was feeling. And I'm like, this is the home of Disney World? Ooh. But that's the big conversation. It's the pronouns and it's the transgenderism. Absolutely. Everywhere you go. Bathrooms, schools. Big conversation right now. What do you know about that conversation? Where do you stand with that conversation? Those are things you need to examine as a consequence of your own experiences. Disability, huge conversation out there with disability right now, especially so because, not just because of the prominent disabilities that we see, but the disability of traumatic brain injuries from 16 years of war in Afghanistan, in Iraq, all of our soldiers coming back. With every time you see a mass shooting and a mass shooting is elevating, what's the default? Must be mental health. So there's a conversation that we need to understand, we need to hear, we need to know about, we need to understand. Socioeconomic status. People shirk when you use the word privilege. But I'm going to use the word privilege, but not in the way a lot of people use privilege. When Hurricane Katrina hit a few years ago, a decade or so ago, a lot of people asked about the over 1,000 people who died. And the question they asked was, why didn't they leave? They got the warnings. Why didn't they leave? If you or anyone else asked that question, you were speaking from a point of privilege. Because if I had said that, which I did not, because I understood what was going on. Again, I came from public housing. If we were in public housing and Hurricane Katrina hit, we may have been fatalities. We didn't have money to catch buses and planes and stay in hotels and go to friends' houses in different places and things of that nature. If I have a problem and I can't get somewhere, I get a flat tire, I can call AAA because I pay for it every year. My wife has a car. If she's got time, she can come pick me up. I got 2,000 friends. I can reach out to them. Everybody doesn't have what I have. So when I look at other people's circumstances and experiences, why didn't they or why don't they? Why don't they just get a job? You're speaking from a point of privilege without understanding who the person is. And we have to be very careful about that. And I'm not saying you may not be right, but you have to be careful because what you communicate matters. And it's very important. So socioeconomic status matters. Family status matters. Education matters. Geographic region matters. Our work status, blue collar, white collar, no collar. I mean, whatever we are, all of that matters in terms of how we see people in diversity. And so when we talk about diversity, I'm advocating for let's stretch the conversation beyond race and ethnicity. Let's talk about these other ways in which people are different. It's just a small list, by the way. There are tons of dimensions of differences that are embraced by this notion of diversity. And it's important for us to understand that. And it's important for us to contemplate that and say, okay, that's a good list right there, but what other ways are those differences expressed? And how are those ways having an impact? So we have what we call the diversity iceberg when we think about diversity. And you heard the term the tip of the iceberg. And this is how people present themselves to us. When we meet people, we see the tip of the iceberg. We see the surface. We see what they show us. We see what they're comfortable revealing to us. But the balance of who that person is, the bulk of who that person is lies below the surface. You do not see these things. So what a person says can maybe be an indication of who they are, what their values are, and how they think, but you still can't know because people can do whatever they want to do regardless of the circumstance or situation. We should think about people, when we think about people, as icebergs, in this sense, that we're only getting a small piece of the picture. And there's so much more that we don't know about. And when we explore that, we find two things, essentially. We find common ground that we can agree on and stand on, and we find differences that can also be common ground. Because if you have an ability or skill or resource set that I don't have, again, within the context of working as a group, it can make us better as a consequence of that. So this dialogue that we have about diversity is difficult, but it's necessary. You have to be open and honest about what you feel, what you think, what you see. You are the man or the woman in the mirror. No one else is. You have to hold yourself accountable, not what other people think or believe. You have to have a personal commitment that goes beyond laws, because laws are there to guide us and direct us and give us some kind of energy, but nobody can make you do something that you're not willing to do. It's inevitable. It's going to happen with or without you. If you look around, things are changing, and you find resistors everywhere. I don't want that to happen. Well, it's happening anyway. It's happening anyway. It's happening. It's happening. So I'd say just get used to it. And here's the point I made earlier when I was talking about men and women. It's everybody's dialogue. How do I know that? The Me Too movement. When the Me Too movement erupted, it was all about men, primarily men's abuse against women, even though people like Kevin Spacey got caught up in that because it was male on male. But anyway, that people are abused is a Me Too issue. But how effective will the movement be in its totality if that conversation is just being had with women, if men are the abusers primarily? You know, this rang a chord in my mind because I know people who've been abused. I know family members who've been abused. It didn't take the Me Too movement for me to have a heightened sense of concern, but it took the Me Too movement to make me bolder in my voice. So now I'm thinking, I got some brothers that I know that are doing some foul stuff. I need to maybe, what's up, man? Really, you rolling like that? I see you doing what you're doing, and I'm acting like I don't see it. That's an ally. Again, I said when we have these differences in who we are within the conversation, that's allyship. And you need that in order to bring fuel around that process. Whatever you might think about the Black Lives Matter movement, and this is not for debate right now. This is just for a demonstration. Whatever you may think about it. The Black Lives movement cannot be effective any more than the civil rights movement was effective with just black people leading it. You have to have other people in the conversation who understand what the challenge of social injustice is and say enough is enough. That's why when George Floyd was murdered, there was an international outcry. You look at this picture, you'll see people from this is not even the United States. People from all over in terms of racial and ethnic background standing in unison. And what was crazy about George Floyd was that it happened at a time where everybody's attention had been arrested because of the pandemic. So people are locked out at home, and now they're forced to see something that they may not have seen if life had just been on cruise control. But life was not on cruise control once the pandemic hit. Everybody's sensitivity was heightened. Everybody was watching. Everybody was aware. And to a person, for the most part, everybody said, that was a murder. And everybody could identify that. And I'm going to tell you even now, I cannot listen to the George Floyd murder. If I see a clip, I don't want to watch it too long, but I can't hear the sound. Because when it gets to the sound of him crying for his mother, you don't think that resonates with every single person on the planet? When you get to a point in your life where your life is about to be taken and you cry for your mother, it's like, as close as I was to my mother, I think about me being in that situation where the only thing you can think about was your savior, your mother, the person who could protect you, who's not there. And yet, you're in this no-win situation. That caught a lot of people's attention. And so if you don't have allyship within the conversation of religion and disability and socioeconomic status, You gotta have people who speak up on your behalf in order to make that happen. All right, I'm gonna get you involved here because I want you to understand the difference between bias, perception, and perspective, and I want you to understand the power of these things. I'm gonna take you through a little exercise right now, and I'm gonna use, let me give my disclaimer first. I've literally been doing this exercise for almost 25 years now. That's not the disclaimer. The disclaimer is it has nothing to do with political or election processes in the present. Nothing. Who's in office, who's not in office, who's trying to be in office. I was doing this long before the great debate of politics emerged a few years ago. And we've not been able to shake it since then. It's just getting worse and worse. Whenever I vote, I'm a big believer in voting. I always believe in understanding something about the candidate before I vote for them. Do they represent and reflect my interests? Are they going to speak on my behalf? I think those are really important. I'm not about just going in and voting to vote. Okay, I voted. What'd you vote for? Why'd you vote? You know, and don't ever ask me who to vote for. I will help to enlighten you about how you can educate yourself. I'm never going to tell you who to vote for because that's your thing, not mine. And so I always believe in giving some candidate disclosure. So I'm going to ask you, I'm going to show you 3 candidates. I'm going to ask you a question about those 3, and I want you to answer. Candidate A associates with faith healers and consults with astrologers, has a mistress, chain smokes and drinks martinis, and has a major disability. That's candidate A. I'm going to take candidate A and I'm going to park candidate A on the shelf for a moment, and I'm going to show you candidate B. Candidate A, you got it? Got candidate A? Okay. Candidate B was kicked out of office twice, sleeps until noon, experimented with opium in college, and drinks brandy on a regular basis. That's candidate B. I love the looks on some people's faces. I'm going to park candidate B on the shelf for just a moment. I'm going to introduce you to candidate C. Candidate C is a decorated war hero, vegetarian, enjoys creating art, doesn't smoke, and if candidate C has a vice, candidate C has an occasional beer from time to time. Now, I've shown you candidate A, candidate B, and candidate C. I'm going to ask you a very, very important question. That question is, I'm making it easy for you too. Which candidate do you think people are most likely to vote for? Candidate A, B, or C? Who says A? Vote your conscience.
I've seen it, I can't comment.
You've seen it. You cannot comment. You're absolutely right, you can't comment.
Yeah, there's a couple of you that have seen this before.
B. Oh, if you've seen it before, don't say a word. Thank you. B. C. Yeah. Okay. All right. So since I have so many C's, I'm going to take somebody from this side. I'm going to take one person. There are a lot of C's. I'm going to this side, this side, this side, and this side. Okay. Somebody from this side. Tell me where's that C? You can't tell me. You didn't say any of them. You want to say something now?
I think most people probably would like to see cut the vision, the status quo.
Okay.
Done.
You think it's close?
You know it's perfect.
It's perfect. Okay. All right. That's fair. That's fair. That's fair. Somebody from this area. Yeah, that's right. You see. You can't say a word.
Candidate C, less illegal transactions on his resume or her resume.
I like that. His or her, because we have not identified a gender. Very good. Okay. All right. Very good. Somebody from this area. That's not you.
Based upon what we know, what you're showing us, right?
Yeah, that's correct.
Iceberg, we don't know all this other stuff, so given what
That's
we
a
had,
good
this
analogy.
is what we think people.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
All right. And then this section.
I would say the same thing. I mean, going off of, just collaboratively, like everything that everyone said, based on paper looks great, based off of his lifestyle, his or her lifestyle, looks good, but we don't really know the nitty gritty. So based off of what you've given us, you would think that you wouldn't want a drug addict or a something like, somebody that's doing drugs or whatever, just the occasional.
Yep.
So
Okay. Fair enough. Fair enough. Well, should let Janet do the reveal or you. I'll do the reveal. Candidate A, 4-time U.S. President Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Elected 4 times. Can you imagine that? Before we had term limits. So elected once, twice, 3, 4 times, died while in office during his 4th term. Would have probably been elected until 5th term. We didn't have the benefit of Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram back then because we had 2 mistresses, not 1. And everyone knew about it. So, you know, and that's all well recorded now. Everybody knows that now, and they can measure all of that fact against history and, you know, just a very interesting kind of situation. Okay? Candidate B. British Prime Minister, and that sir always means something of significance. Winston Churchill. You ready for your candidate in mind? What everybody would likely choose, right? All right, let's go with it.
Oh, no.
Right, but to be fair,
What?
that's reality. That is scary as.
She said the narcissist.
She did say
social
I
media.
know them well. She said, I know them well. So
I'll take
That's
it.
her next training. Call me out later, T.
I was gonna say the only thing that made that candidate less perfect was he didn't taunt his Christianity in the South.
Right, right.
Put
That's
him on
all
a
it
uniform.
needs.
Yep.
Right. Yeah. Okay, so clearly there's a message in this. And the message is pretty obvious, but there are messages at several levels that I want to share. Number one, we should never draw a major conclusion with just a little bit of information. Now, as much as I say that, people still do it. People will literally walk out of sessions like this and still do it. And I'm just offering a cautionary tale and saying that when we meet people and draw major conclusions about them, we don't see the rest of the iceberg. We just saw the tip. So if the totality of that thing, of that person, is based on those things that are under that iceberg, including the tip, then we really need to give people a chance before we cast judgment. I like to say I'm the least judgmental people in the world. I'm not saying I don't make judgment calls, but I really don't spend a lot of time invested in judgment. People ask me all the time, what do you think about so-and-so? What do you think about such and such doing so-and-so? Gee, I got too much to think about me doing such and such and so-and-so. I don't have that energy. I really don't. I'm serious about that. It's like, you know, well, I'm trying to keep it together. I'm trying to make sure that, you know, my ducks in a row. I mean, what I think about it, Dr. King said that the evil that we find in the worst person can be found in us. And we don't want to think that. We don't want to believe that. But it's true. If you're a human being, you are susceptible to flaws and deficiencies and horrible things. We see it all the time. We see the neat, well-manicured family in which one of the family members kills all the other family members. And we go, oh my goodness, but they kept the lawn so nice. They went to church all the time. They ate together, had backyard barbecues. And they're cutting people up in the garage. I mean, we see it all the time, and then we act amazed. Oh my gosh, that's because we focused on the tip of the iceberg, and we drew a major conclusion without all the information. You can't know everything about somebody by just at the surface. You can't judge a book by its cover. You know, if it's a pretty cover, you don't know what the contents are. You know, don't worry about judging the surface. Invest in getting to know more about the person that presents themselves to you. You know, this is one interesting thing to me too, because there are people who literally don't like other people because their friend doesn't like them. That's crazy. That's crazy. That's crazy. I'm telling you, that's crazy. You've decided something about somebody you don't even know because somebody else that you do know has decided they don't like. Wow, what is it about human nature that makes us do that type of thing to other people? Again, that's why I said diversity is so important, because it makes us self-aware. If I'm that type of person, I need to examine that within myself and say, wow, step back a little bit. You don't need to be doing that. the facts that's presented don't always give you the big picture. Now, I was very deliberate in giving you small pieces of information, and I kind of directed the thinking because of what I gave you. So I was hoping to move it in a certain direction, but I also gave you, I think, a lead by saying, what do you think other people would think? Because when I kind of open it up to what do you think, people will freely choose A and B. And all you're really doing is connecting with the values that are part of your life and identifying with the values that are part of that person's life. And then everybody has a backstory. And that's why I want to go for a moment. And that's why I shared my story, because I have a backstory. You know, today I have 2 degrees. I've never been arrested or in police custody. I own a home. I'm married. You know, work in the mayor's office for the largest city in the state of Alabama. And yet, most people will not look at me and say, oh, that guy used to live in public housing. Very few people would say that. Very few people would say, when I say, you know, I've been fired from a job before. Like, you were? As if that's some kind of uncommon experience. but I'm kind of like, yeah, but I didn't know. No, of course you didn't know. Now, the circumstances were very interesting. You want to know? See people looking like this? I'll tell you the short version. I was working for, I'll call the company out, Charter Retreat Hospital. I was the counseling center director. They told me that I had to increase the revenue over a period of 3 months, or they would probably look at my being able to stay on. And so when you work for a mental health center, you can't just drag people off the street and put them in bed and things like that. That's what I'm supposed to do. And so what was ironic about it was when they first told me that, it was $4,000, we were bringing $4,000 a month in revenue. Doesn't sound like a lot, but it really was a lot. That was not hospitalizations, that was just counseling visits. And counseling visits were like $75 an hour at that time. So I mean, that's the way they were judging all that. And so I did raise it from 4 to 8. I did 8 and 8. They wanted me to do 12 the next. I didn't do 12, so they decided to fire me. Same day I got fired, I was offered another job by a person who was on their staff as their clinical psychologist who quit, terminated their contract that afternoon to protest what they had done to me. And a week later, the person that replaced me was fired. This company went bankrupt 2 years later. So I'm a person of faith. I always believed that I was being kept. I really do. And that, you know, the thing that I feared the most about that is for the rest of my life, I'm going to have to say I was fired from a job. And it's never affected me in any way. You know, I always say, I will discuss. Nobody's ever asked me. You know, it's just one of those things that happens. But people look at you and they're like, oh, you did what? Or what happened to you? Because we're making judgments about people from what we see on the surface. All of us do it. Our backstory includes all of these things, and then some. So when we talk about a person walking into a room, and we use a very basic, simple definition of diversity is having 2 people who are different in a room, your assumption should always be that person has a backstory that I know little about, and that all I'm doing is being presented with the tip of the iceberg. The only way I'm going to really get to know a person is by getting below the iceberg. Now, here's the crazy thing about it. If you work in HR and you do, or you're on a search committee or something, and you do interviews and stuff like that, people always, I would say rarely, I've seen some pretty funky interviews where I thought, do they really want this job? I've seen it happen sometimes. It's kind of weird when it does, but it's sort of like, do they really want this job? But most people are going to give you their best. I mean, that resume is going to be glowing. They're going to direct you to the references that they need you to talk to. But if they gave you a different set of references, or you uncovered a different set of references, you might get a different perspective. And so we have to understand that the backstory that comes into our experiences every day in our workplaces is not just a lifelong backstory, but it is also a 24-hour backstory. But in between the last time we saw a person and the time we see them again, we have no idea what that person has experienced. And we need to be, I think, gracious to people, and we need to be generous to people, because we just don't know. So, and this is just an expansion of what I just said on the backstory. And do you know me? All of these things, when a person comes into a room, are part of who they are. They're all in play. And there's certain things about what's in play that you might engage people in conversation about, and there's certain things that you would never engage somebody about. But understand that all of these things are in play. All of these things and then some are in play whenever you're meeting somebody. Now for me, as I said, I'm going back to what I said about diversity being an opportunity. I see this as an opportunity to connect. I had a friend who knows it's my birthday coming up on Sunday. I saw him on Monday. I saw him last Sunday at a concert. He said, "You want your gift now or later?" And I said, "Now." So why are we gonna wait? And so he gave it to me now. And he said, "I got those just for you." And there were 2 mugs, baseball mugs. One had the New York emblem over here, and the other one had another little baseball emblem here that said Yankees. And this was a friend that has taken the time to get to know and appreciate my rabid affection for the Yankees, and wanted to gift me with these 2 flasks that I'm just so honored to have. You know, it's part of my collection now too, because I'm a collectible. But what I'm saying is this: connecting with people in ways that excite them is really what it's all about. It's not about meeting people and telling them all about you. It's about you meeting people and lining up to tell you about them. And giving people a chance to just share. And the more you do that, the more trust will develop. You know, when you push people in a situation, they feel like they're forced to answer. I don't want answers. Why? You know, create comfort in your experience, and people will be more willing to open up to you as you go by. It's amazing to me how when we deal with tools, diversity is not an issue. In fact, I like to say, you know, Home Depot, Lowe's. I love Home Depot and Lowe's because you find the tool that you need to get the job done. It's just a beautiful experience. I mean, just the right tool for the right screw, for the right equipment. I mean, you can find whatever you need to get the job done, and that makes it so much better. So we embrace diversity when it comes to tools. A couple of teams that play football in my state. I've never pledged allegiance to either one, folks. I've been able to duck and dodge it. And when people say, who do you like, Alabama or Auburn, I don't want to offend anybody. I mean, I grew up in New York City. We weren't big college football fans. We were pro fans because we got pro football, baseball, basketball, hockey teams. That's what I wanted to say. But you got to pick one. So I have chosen to pick one. I'm not going to tell you who. But I'm surrounded by this all the time. And if I figured out, though, you got to be clever with this. I figured out how to leverage the right answer anytime I'm asked. But even though I've chosen one, I figured out how to leverage it. You take the temperature in the room. Who's in the room? I'm not going to say the opposite if the room is full of the other. Go with you. That's who I'm with. They don't know the difference. You know what else? How else I do that too? Like if I come to Tennessee, I become a Vol. Well, who's your team? The Vol.
Raiders.
Oh, all right. I could be a Blue Raider too. I'm not going to chameleon when it comes to this. It's like whoever I need to be, I'm going to be. Talking about diversity, I'm going to be whoever I need to be. You know. But isn't it interesting how these 11 players line up on each side of the ball? They each have their own specific purpose. They each have their own specific identity. And we get out there and we cheer for our team and we want our team to win. And it's like diversity, diversity, diversity. We get it when it comes down to sports. We even get it when we look at a rainbow, and the beauty of the rainbow is the diversity of its colors. You know, I'm in awe anytime I see a rainbow. And so, make it a double rainbow, I'm like, I'm in heaven. I'm like, oh my goodness, look at the beauty of that thing. And sometimes the colors are so brilliant when you look at it, it just causes you to marvel. And we can appreciate it. And I have gotten to thinking, now what if that was just one big band of yellow or orange? It wouldn't be as dramatic as the combination of the colors coming together in that process. The only time that we have problem with diversity when it comes to people, the only time that we find this issue of disagreeing and being disagreeable about it is when we have people. You know, somebody doesn't think like me, want like me, then they must be a problem. And that's just not where we are in terms of this conversation. So as I close, I want to take you through one final exercise. And I want to show you the power of perspective and how it shapes everything that we think, say, and do. For me, this is the critical core element of diversity, equity, and inclusion, how you see things. Because I believe how you see things affects how you respond to things. So in my mind, I'm an Albert Ellis rational emotive therapist. For those that know about Albert Ellis. Ellis basically said that we are who we are because of how we think. That's the bottom line. And you can literally, if you're an RT therapist, you basically work on people's cognitive thoughts to cause them to transition into healthier thinking. Because the basis of their thinking is faulty, it's irrational, it's bad, it sends them down crazy pathways in life. And that's not what we want. And I think it's the same thing that happens with DEI stuff. We look at differences. So perspective matters. And I want to demonstrate why that is right now. So walk with me on this. You look at this image, you might see a couple by the lake, but somebody has already seen what else I see. And you see? What do you say? No, you can't say. Stop cheating over there. You see a baby. Okay. You got it. Since you spoke first, you got to go show the baby. Quickly, come up and show the baby. Quickly. Come on, people are looking. People are struggling. Quickly.
5 toes, nose, mouth.
Y'all see it?
The hair, this is the body.
All right. See a baby in a fetal position. Now, some people saw it immediately. Some people had to warm up to it. Some people had other people direct them in the right pathway. I saw the direction going on, and there's nothing wrong with that. Let's try one more. You see a face, or you might see
Word. I did see the
The word liar.
the word liar.
Oh, when you said it.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you.
All right. Everybody with this? Okay. The word liar. Okay. I'm gonna make this one easy. This is a picture of a big bird with something in its mouth. All I'm gonna do is shift your perspective by turning this picture upside down. I'm gonna turn this picture upside down. You now see a man in a canoe off of a small island pulling a big fish. What was in the bird's mouth is a man in a sombrero. The beak is the canoe. The bird's head is the fish. The bird's belly is the island. The bird's legs are now trees. I didn't change the picture, I just shifted my perspective. I maybe stood in a different spot. I maybe listened a little differently. I may have taken another look at the situation and tried to determine what was going on in that situation. So I gave myself a chance to experience something different in terms of the reality just by shifting where I was in that process. In this picture, we see an old lady or a young woman. Old, young. Picture hasn't changed at all. And right now, some people are struggling to see the old lady, and some people are struggling to see the young lady. Trust me, both are there. And time will not permit to break it all down. But they're there. Old and young ladies are there. My point of perspective is this and why it's so valuable. Everybody does not see things from the same point of view, and that's the first lesson in conflict management. It's okay. Like, chill out, get some sleep. Don't worry about the medication. Don't let people drive you to drink. I mean, look, people are going to disagree with you. It's okay. Conflict is real, and conflict is okay. In some situations, conflict is even good. But we have to be open enough to be able to say, allow it to happen. There are different ways of looking at the same thing. That's the bird. Showed you one image, turned it upside down, it became a different reality. Social interaction will produce understanding. I saw people whispering to each other and talking. I asked you to share by showing us what was up because you saw it first or you spoke up first. It's important for us to recognize that people have information that can help us and not deny that they have information to help us. We need to ask them. We need to recognize people's gifts. We need to recognize people's skills. We need to recognize people's assets, their resource sets, and ask them for the help that we need. Some will get it sooner than others. Some will refuse to get it, and I would not waste a lot of time with these last two. Some are never going to get it. The refusals will make your life very difficult, the ones who are never going to get it will waste your time. Now, I'm not saying you don't need to try and be consistent, but you're going to burn up a lot of energy and bandwidth trying to accommodate people who are going to either refuse or never get it. It's going to shape everything that you think, say, and do. So be honest with yourself, value and respect others' viewpoints. That means agree to disagree, don't be disagreeable, and invest in your own journey. This has to be something that you personalize. Why perspective matters to me is because of this. Look at this picture and tell me that this person had a good day or a bad day.
Good day if they survive.
Good day if they survive, and it looks like they did.
The boat's still good.
The boat's still there, and the boat definitely costs more than the truck.
Technically, the truck's not completely donezo. They can pull it up.
Absolutely. So you got that little value right there. Good.
There are people helping.
There are people helping. This could be a situation where the person's all by themselves, and that would be a completely different reality. Could be night. Could be inclement weather. There are a lot of things that could be happening in a situation. But let me step back away for a moment, because most people identify that this is not the worst situation that you can be in. But let me really help you understand something that has helped me. I don't see life as either good or bad, and I don't see days as good or bad. I see days as having good and bad moments. The reason for that is because, again, going back to perspective, when I define my whole day as a bad day, I have totally neutralized and eliminated every positive thing that's happened. And one of the most positive things that happens is that I have my health, I have my strength, I have my family. I mean, there are all kinds of things that you can look at and say, I've got those things. I don't care how horrible this person was treating me, that just, took me out of my game and distracted me and deflected all of my feelings and emotions. If you choose to go down that rabbit hole, that's your choice. But you can choose to deflect that by saying, look, this was a bad situation, life goes on. This was just one thing in a 24-hour period that happened. Don't destroy my whole day. And if people who literally get ulcers and migraines and have to have surgery for various things because they allow those things to internally eat them up. And so I'm like, no. Just you had a good experience or a bad experience, and your day is made up of good and bad experiences. Maybe you'll be blessed with another day. You ever get to the airport and see something like this? One of the worst situations, because you're trying to get there. Many years ago, I'm flying. I learned how to just quell that. I got to a gate, people groveling and complaining, and I was tempted to do a little bit of that myself, and then it dawned on me where I was. I was on the ground. They made an announcement that the plane was having mechanical problems. And it hit me. I'm on the ground. That experience could have been happening at 30,000 feet, which would have called for a different kind of groveling and complaining, and maybe some praying. So I learned how to, in life, appreciate moments that were perhaps not the most ideal situations. They were different from the ideal of what I might have wanted, but they allowed me to understand that those differences are not the things that define my life or experience. And I use that as an example of how we deal with people. People who come to us with different experiences and different kinds of identities, and different kinds of outcomes, different kinds of experiences, are not the worst thing that happens in our lives. Our perspective is going to shape everything that we think, say, and do. And the last thing I'll say about this is this, that you want to be mindful about stereotyping people, because only one of these people is a convicted felon. I listen both, but listen. Stereotypes matter, and we stereotype people all the time. All the time. Again, we stereotype them because we're looking at the tip of the iceberg. You have to understand that it's deeper than the tip. It's deeper than the tip. There's more to it than that. All right, so here's my wrap. Where do we go from here? Different is not deficient. If someone is different from you, they're not broken. They're not a lesser version than you. They're not incapable. They're just different. And for me, those differences represent opportunities. So that's when I talk about perspective. If my perspective is, you know what? they don't have the same energy level that I do. But that doesn't make them deficient. They don't have the same skill set or educational background as I do. But that doesn't make them broken. I'm more focused on what is the contribution that they can make as opposed to the contribution that they don't have the capacity to make. And that's what most of us do. We spend a lot of time talking about what people can't do rather than focusing on what they can do and then celebrating them for what they can do to inspire them to do more. That's a much better way to approach the process. If your circle of friends all look like you, talk like you, act like you, and think like you, you need a bigger circle. This is not about checking a box. This is not about me as a black person saying, I got a white friend. This is about not me as a heterosexual person saying, I know someone from the LGBTQ plus community. That's not what that's about. I don't go out, when I say strategic and intention as it relates to DEI, I'm not looking for one. I got one. I'm not looking for that. I'm not looking for that. But that's kind of how people, listen to how people talk sometimes.
Yeah.
I know A. People just listen to how people talk sometimes. That's how they're identified. And what I'm saying is it should be more organic than that. When you go into a situation and you find somebody who's different, that should be fascinating. And whatever the difference is, I gave you a bunch of ideas on differences. Race, religion, disability, socioeconomic status, geographic location, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Those are just differences. And that should be fascinating. So I hear you say something in the introduction section, and then there's a break, and I walk over to you and say, isn't that something I heard you say that you like so-and-so, you've done such and such. And then you start a conversation from that very naturally. And maybe that's the last conversation you have with that person, but that's an opportunity to open up that space for possibilities. And then maybe that's something you work with, so you end up having more conversations with that person. And that's how friendships evolve. That's how networks and communities are built as a consequence of that. It's not me saying, I'm going to check the box, and by the end of the year, I'm going to have one of these, one of these, one of these, one of these. That's not what we're looking for. We're looking for a rich, organic experience where I put myself into experiences where people are different, and I'm taking advantage of those opportunities. I'm going to tell you one of the most important people who are different from me that I like to take advantage of, and that's young people. I love being around young people because they inspire me for a lot of reasons. And especially when it comes to technology matters, the younger the better.
Yeah.
They can tell me all kinds of tips and tricks and things with electronic devices that I have no clue about. And if I just, it's just a kid. Get out of here, kid. Look at how much I lose as a consequence of that. And so we have to look for opportunities in those differences and expand our circle in ways that can be beneficial. So ask yourself, what experiences have you had with people from these other different kinds of groups? Because this matters. Again, if you're thinking about this with intention, and you're thinking about this with some level of honesty and saying, well, I have been limited in that sense. How can I perhaps have more experiences with other people? And my suggestion is always to invite people to you, not just, invite yourself to other people's things as opposed to inviting them to yours. Because yours is a familiar territory. But if there's a group having, I'm just using this as an example, if the Native American Coalition is having a festival, go to experience the cultural experience of it. You don't know what'll happen. You'll learn things, you'll meet people, you'll just have a great time. And think about it in a way, okay, this is something I don't have a lot of in my resource bank. This is something I've never been exposed to. Think about it that way so that you can start building those bridges. What were you told when you were growing up by your parents and significant others about people from those groups? Because those things are part of your backstory. And those things matter as a consequence of where you are in this journey. And what are your current feelings? That's why I said self-awareness is important. You should always be asking yourself where you stand as far as people from different groups impact your life and your experience. Very important to do. Alliance building, as I said, is very important. Developing allies. Asking yourself about opportunities for education. Asking yourself, have you changed your behavior as a consequence of what you've learned? Do you have a different language, for example? I remember I used to always say the disabled people. But the more appropriate term is a people with disabilities phrase, because you're not making the person the thing. You see the difference? Now, a lot of people say, oh, that's just political correctness. No, it's sensitivity and it's compassion. You say disabled, a car is disabled. That means it's broken down. You got to fix it. And then you have a person with a disability, and I know people with disabilities who have climbed mountains. I've never climbed a mountain before. And have parasailed. I've never parasailed before. I've seen them do extraordinary, heroic things in acts of war that I've never done before. So that's a person with a disability. They're not disabled. And we have to be mindful about how we speak about those kinds of things. Are you willing to give up any privileges for other people who don't have them? Do you make friends with people who are different from you or take a public stand against discrimination? Do you support the value of cultural differences, and do you have a vision for a multi-ethnic society? Vernon Myers, who's a very, very famous diversity expert, said diversity is being invited to the party, inclusion is being asked to dance. I add to that, equity is being asked to dance on something that you like to dance with, either the music, the style of dance, or more. Because when we talk about equity, we're talking about fairness, we're talking about access. So I may be having a lot of fun at the dance, and I may be learning a different kind of a dance, but where's my music? And I'm not saying you need to just throw music in just to make people happy. I'm saying that when you're planning an event that's a community-wide event, you want to think about things that appeal to all kinds of different people as a consequence of that. Equity is not equality, and this is perhaps one of the most powerful ways I can show this. We did an internal conversation last month with the city about the difference between equality and equity, because a lot of people have been asking me, why don't we just talk about equality? Equality is good, but it's not enough, and here's why. As I said, equity deals with fairness and access. I can give you equal boxes, but you don't have equal access. You don't have equal ability to participate in the assignment as a consequence of that. So equality gives you something, but it doesn't give you enough. And here's another even perhaps better example with equality and equity. We're going to have a bike ride and somebody actually uses a wheelchair. Well, how does that person get up on the bike and ride? You have to modify equipment so that that person can participate also. That's what equity is. Equality means you give them the same thing that you have, not acknowledging that they may need something different. And I'm not saying to give them some kind of unearned or unfair advantage. I'm talking about so that they can participate. I'm not saying give them the answers to the test because they haven't studied. I'm saying look at the situation and determine what they need in order to participate in that situation. Final thing I'll say, and then got just a couple minutes. If you've got any questions for me, I'll answer them, or comments. Thank you, Dan. I once read a book by Carl Sagan, a late great astronomer, that just blew my mind, his Shadow Forgotten Ancestors, and this was taken from that book, and it's never left me because it is so powerful, even more so today, now that we really understand the Human Genome Project, which has made us more alike than ever before. The human differences that we see on the outside that we spend so much time evaluating, our size, our skin color, our eye shape, our head texture, are not matched by the differences that we find on the inside. In fact, every person on Earth shares 99.9% of the same DNA sequences. Look at that number. 99.9%. That's almost 100%, folks. We're almost the same. I wouldn't want that. But 99.9% of the same DNA sequences. All humans, no matter how ethnically diverse, are essentially identical. We're all cut from the same cloth, made on the same pattern, granted the same strengths and weaknesses, and will ultimately share the same fate. I close by saying this. I have O positive blood. If I had a major emergency tonight that required a transfusion, I'm not going to ask you what your religious beliefs are, what your socioeconomic status is, what your gender is, what your sexual identity or orientation is. It won't matter to me because all I want to do is live. I want to know that you have healthy, O positive blood. It is the great equalizer in life to know that we are 99.9% of the same. And think about how we don't allow ourselves to engage and interact with people who look different from us on the outside because we see that tip of the iceberg and we define them by certain kinds of things that we may believe about them, and look at the opportunities that we're losing as a consequence of that. What an amazing, amazing experience. I want to thank you for this opportunity to speak to you. I want to say that it is once again my great privilege, Janet, to have been here today. And I hope that I've said something to challenge your thinking, to cause you to imagine some things about the work and the space that we're in and the kind of direction that we want to go in as a society. And I will close with that. Are there any comments, questions, anything?
Awesome, thank you for being here and presenting this today.
You're welcome.
You know, as an organization and as we continue to grow, I think what I'd love some maybe advice and some tips, and this would probably be something obviously that could go on for evolve over time. But you know, our organization and what we represent in the community and how we are viewed, so we can ensure that we share the mission that we take this very seriously as far as diversity, equity, and inclusion, and we want a very diverse group of women and men. So we have to in an organization. So just what is that? As far as some tips on, you know, we've got obviously a great membership. Number one, I think just ensuring that they want to applaud and shout that to our community, so we can continue to be more and more diverse.
Right. So for me, engagement is an important part of that. And when I say engagement, I mean not simply, I'm kind of going back to what I said about working with teen issues and not having them engaged. You have to do some kind of assessment of who's in the community and what they think about what you're trying to do. So rather than, you know, you have to, when you're trying to get people connected to something, you have to give them a why, a reason to be connected to it. So by asking them and engaging them in conversation and dialogue, you know, we do town hall meetings and other kinds of things. We sit down and do interest groups with people and kind of survey people at times, different groups, to kind of get feedback from them about maybe what are they doing, how do they understand this work to look in their particular organization, what can we do to support you or to provide information for you. I think a lot of times we do good things, but we do it independently of feedback from other people. And I think that feedback is extremely important to have if you want to connect with people. Because you can really put together some great programs and then wonder where people are. It's not just because they don't have the time, it's that they don't have the vested interest. You know, people connect with what matters to them. You have to give them a reason for what you're doing to matter to them. One of the reasons it matters to them, and that's why representation is important. If you invite me to be a part of something, your group needs to look like it represents me too, if I'm from a different group. Otherwise, I'm not looking to integrate anything. You know, I'm not looking to be the first. In instances that you may have to be the first. But that's going back to what I said about it's not a box checking thing. You know, you have to have a sense of purpose in terms of understanding what your mission is, and then be able to, and I'm not saying you don't, I'm just sort of talking out loud. And you need to be able to communicate that to people. So you're saying you want a more diverse group, the question people are going to ask you is why? What is it that you're doing that I should be interested in? And you should have that answer for them, so that they can have a why as to why they want to be a part of that. And of course, people are always going to have different reasons for why they do or don't do things. But I definitely think that's a missing element in a lot of organizations where we don't take the time to canvas the community. And the piece I said about going to people rather than inviting people to us, I think that we have a lot of meetings in communities where we say, come. We even say, we're going to feed you. You know, like, well, what's wrong with going to that community center over there? Or why not go to the place where we know we're going to find people? Why not communicate with the bishop or the reverend or the minister or the pastor? Why not communicate with them and go to their church or their mosque or their synagogue? Why not go there and have the opportunity to engage them? You know, rather than thinking about it kind of like in this big collective way. And we think about this that sometimes. We want to cast a wide net over the community and then hope to catch fish that way. And for me, it's a much more strategic, targeted thing. Again, it's like sitting down with a group of people and looking around and saying, okay, who's missing? What are we doing? Why are we doing it? If we invite people into our house, what kind of experience are they going to have? are the programs going to represent their interests? That's how come it's important to talk to people about what are you interested in. You know, I'm a member, was a member of Rotary in Huntsville. And I was a member of Rotary for, I think, 5 years. And then the pandemic hit. Well, my why for Rotary was not the lunch that we had at the Von Braun Civic Center every week. That was nice. That wasn't my why. My why was the Strive program, which is a mentoring program at all of the high schools where we were given and assigned a mentee at the first of every school year, and then we followed them the whole school year. And it was up to me to build that relationship with that mentee. So I would have lunch with them every Friday. I'd go to their events and meet their families and all of that kind of, text, phone, all that stuff. That was my why. And then when the pandemic hit and all that stopped, I stopped coming to, well, first everybody stopped coming to the dinner, but the lunches. But then when they started back again, they were in COVID protocols and they were like, we're doing these limited things. We're not back in the schools yet because schools have their thing going on with remote learning. And, so I was out of sync with just going to lunch. I mean, I'm paying a yearly membership fee to have lunch once a week. That wasn't a big enough why for me. It had nothing to do with whether I could afford it, but hey, my plate is full. I got a lot of things going on. I have to decide what's important and what's not. And I think when you're dealing with people, that's exactly what they're dealing with also. It's like, what really matters to you? And you got to tell them what that why is, because they're going to ask you. Why should I be a part of that group? Why should I want to join this organization? What is the commitment? You get all those kinds of questions like that. Those are legitimate questions, but that's how I would be thinking strategically as you start out thinking about this broader sense of what might be able to happen.
Questions? Kenny,
Well, I learned a lot, even though I've heard pieces of this before, but I still learned a lot. But thank you all for coming. I hope you all learned something. And thank you. There are several members from the DEI committee here. So thank you for being here. And so I guess we go forth and implement all those things we learned.
I was gonna say, I have a booth at Pride this weekend if anybody wants to come join that crowd.
You said what?
I have a booth at Pride, Borough Pride this weekend.
Saturday night.
Well, and I think that's good, through our communications. I think that's even, just to answer my question, I think you answered it there, through our communications through Zaps and just ensuring that we know what's going on in the community. So I wanted to especially say thank you to Janet and the DEI committee for just, this was a very wonderful event for obviously doing the research and as far as phenomenal